Welcome to the Soul of Medicine. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's podcast. We're so excited to have our guest on, and she's from Nashville and talking about nature and healing and forest bathing, forest therapy. We're so excited to have her on. So, hi, Georgia.
Hey, guys.
Welcome, Georgia.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and talking to you.
Yay. So let me do an intro to you because this is super impressive, and I just want everybody to get to know you a little bit, and then we'll dive into some questions. Does that sound okay?
Great.
Okay. So today we're diving into a topic that feels more essential than ever: how to find calm and reduce anxiety in our increasingly fast-paced world. You might be surprised to learn that the solution we're exploring today isn't a new meditation app or a complex mindfulness technique, but rather something much simpler and more natural. Our guest is Georgia Bromehead. Did I pronounce that right? I did. Thank you. Woo-hoo. Hey, we were teasing on her variations of her last name prior to the recording, but I got it right. Yay. So she's the founder and guide of Forest Therapy Nashville. Georgia is passionate about helping people connect with the healing power of nature through the practice of forest therapy, also known as forest bathing. Inspired by the Japanese tradition of Shinrin-yoku, did I pronounce that right? Yay, I'm on it today. Forest therapy invites us to slow down and engage with the natural world in a mindful way, using all of our senses to tap into the therapeutic benefits of the forest. So as someone who has struggled with feeling overwhelmed, along with everybody else, by the demands of modern life, Rob and I were deeply curious to learn more about how forest therapy works and why it's gaining recognition as a powerful tool for reducing stress and improving mental well-being. Georgia is going to share how forest therapy differs from a typical hike in the woods and the scientifically proven ways it can help our brains and bodies relax and rejuvenate. Welcome again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for bringing the questions and making this a topic on your podcast. So excited. The practice is more popular now than it was 5 or 6 years ago, but still I feel like an ambassador for nature time.
When you say it seems more popular, where are people hearing about it? Like when they come to you, like what are they saying?
I think it's been in more articles recently as an option for healing and meditation and mindfulness. I think Hillary Clinton mentioned forest bathing in some interview a year or so ago. It's to that level now. And the American Psychiatric Association just included it as a tool for healing in their last year's survey. So it's made the list of available tools. So it's in the consciousness now.
Very cool. Well, it's funny because in the way we practice, but like in my life, it's always been therapy. It's always been medicine for me. Like I need to be outdoors. And it's something I regularly, I guess you can say, prescribe when we work with our clients. And I teach it when I teach other pharmacists. So I'm always talking, and I've been doing it for years, forest bathing. But what I was really shocked, because Kay found you and she's like, let's do this. I'm like, all right, sounds amazing. So could you describe, because I'm one that I just like to get out in the woods without any bookends of time. Like mine's more of like a play orientation, all those qualities that come with it, just to kind of be in it. But when we did that with you, it was intentional. And there was this kind of journey we took. Can you kind of share the difference between just kind of tripping around in the woods and, what you offer people?
Yes. I think for many people, what you can do yourself is a little bit more challenging, especially if they haven't spent much time in nature. So being trained as a forest therapy guide, basically forest therapy is kind of a way of guiding forest bathing. Anybody can forest bathe. When you're outside listening to a sound or looking up at the clouds or looking at a leaf, feeling a leaf, you're forest bathing. Forest therapy, the walk that I guided you on, is kind of a container that helps take people from left brain, verbal mind, into their bodies, into their senses, slowly and intentionally. It kind of provides like bumpers on the bowling lane to help get you to that playful, sometimes grief-full, sometimes boredom-full connection and relationship with nature.
Do you have people that come to you, maybe they're regular hikers or they get out a lot, but they actually walk away being like, wait, that was a different experience?
Yes, all the time. Hiking is usually, and when you do a forest therapy walk with me or any guide, you in a public place, you will quickly notice the difference between hiking and forest bathing or forest therapy, because people are usually talking if they're with another person. And at the minimum, they're walking at a pretty quick pace from point A to point B. And forest therapy walks take place in a really small area. And you're really zooming in. You're standing more still. I mean, you're moving a bit, but you're really staying in one place, zooming into the abundance of beings that are just in that tiny area. So you're traveling in a way, but almost deep into the same spot that you're standing in instead of on the surface of A to B.
I agree with that. I mean, I think sometimes when I hike, I'm like, okay, how many am I burning off my breakfast right now? And I'm like, I get my cardio in. And I remember going on that walk with you and the intention you had of maybe finding certain things or observing, was so profound for me, just because life is so fast and, you miss it. And just by saying, oh, pay attention to this or bring this back. And how do you feel when you're walking around? I mean, like you're saying, that those deep reflections inside, I can see why it downregulates the nervous system, because we're not in fight or flight or A to B mode. It's just so present, and nature itself and the trees is so healing. I mean, just energetically, and allowing its magic and its medicine to work. If we slow down, I mean, if we're going a million miles per hour, we're just going to miss it, And so, being in nature, even doing grounding activities just with your shoes off, is something that we prescribe a lot for our patients. And it is so healing for people, more than any supplement or med or, anything that we can offer in that way. So it's super profound.
I think as you're speaking, I think you're getting us to another special aspect of forest bathing or forest therapy, which is it's a relational practice. And hiking in the woods, you're within the natural environment, and you do, of course, I mean, I like hiking too. You are seeing the tree canopy and the colors, and you're hearing things, and there's some relationship going on there, but it's more so your body and kind of a blur of green and trees and shapes. And forest therapy and forest bathing asks us to slow down and really engage with many, many, many beings, like a leaf or a spider web or a cloud up there, and explore their texture, their smell, their shape, their color. And in that way, we start to build a relationship with the land in depth and in detail and in a slow pace. And I think that is a huge healing element that's different from a lot of other practices, is that relational component.
I would definitely agree. And, part of what you notice and you feel on that. And it also brings to mind you're kind of freeing yourself from distractions by what you're immersing yourself into. Because you also see a lot of people who might be out on the trail. They got one of these in their hand, and then that is their relationship. So you're actually switching relationships from where you were doing usually whatever just before you got out of the car, right? And into that. Do you have rules like that with people when they hike? It's like cell phone stay behind or anything like that?
I used to say that when I first started guiding, please, I encourage you to take a picture with your mind, not your phone, because it will take you out of the experience. But recently, in past years, it's so rare for people to get out of phone. And I hope, maybe I'm making this up and giving guiding too much credit, but when you say something like, go out and feel the textures of this land and bring back your favorite 3, now your mind, your psyche has a mission. And that's it. And that's where that childlike play comes in too for some people. Sometimes, that might be uncomfortable for other people, but sometimes it is okay, I'm on a mission now to find my favorite texture. And what does this feel like? What does that feel like? So you almost forget phones, I hope. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but it seems like that doesn't happen very much anymore.
That makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah. And I do relate to that a lot too. When I'm hiking, sometimes I look cool, like I'm having a nature activity, but I'm actually thinking about everything back home, all the things I have to do and work and relationship. But a guided forest bathing experience, like a forest therapy walk, helps give your mind just enough to do that's embodied. It's all sense-based. So it helps kind of give you a little bridge away from left brain rattle to meditative liminal headspace.
So what inspired you to start Forest Therapy Nashville, and how did you become involved with this practice? You also do therapy as well, right?
I'm a mental health therapist.
Yeah, mental health therapist.
I became a guide first, not knowing I was going to go back to grad school and become a mental health therapist later. I went to Japan. I don't remember if we talked about that, but my husband and I taught English in Japan for a year. And I noticed one of the most beautiful things about where we were is every season had its special attention, and they lived within the weather. So when it was winter, our house was freezing. Our things in our fridge would freeze. When it was summer, our house was boiling. And the decorations changed, throughout the season. They're just really reverent of that cycle, like nature and cycle. And at the kindergarten that I taught at, I just loved it. The windows were open all the time. There were trees around. We were nestled in this natural environment, and the kids would bring animals in and out and have shoes off in the summer and be bundled up in their class in the winter. So I think that nature connection had been long gone for me. So I spent a lot of time by myself in the woods in childhood, but I hadn't seen people living within nature in that way in many years. And so I thought I was going to start a preschool, like a forest preschool. That did not happen because I found the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy's website. And I realized that who needs this nature connection is actually me and adults. And then I let it sit like we do for a couple of years and didn't do anything about it. And then I finally kind of had this epiphany and knew, I'm ready to sign up for the guide training. So I signed up for the guide training and went up to Pennsylvania for that because at the time, 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of guides were either in California or New England. So I went up there and I did the training, and it was incredible. It was so deep and transformative for me as a human being. And then nobody was actively doing it in Nashville. And I almost named Forest Therapy Nashville Cathedral Forest Therapy because the forest is like my church. It's like a cathedral experience for me. But I thought, no, just keep it clean. Nashville needs this. Let's make it like Google searchable. So I named it Forest Therapy Nashville and just started. And I started spreading the word about it and started guiding at Cheekwood Botanical Gardens. They kind of took a chance on this brand new idea. And I started guiding weekly there. And I had most every week, no one knew what forest bathing was. I would make jokes about, we're not going to wear bathing suits today. This is a different kind of bathing. And it was just amazing to see people sign up for something they didn't know anything about. They just kind of like nature, or they're big birders or something like that. And then to see how we all were in our circle at the end of the walk. There were tears almost every week, tears of remembrance and connection, and grief for the disconnection that they'd been feeling, and joy at just being in a beautiful experience for 2 hours with complete strangers and with nature. So that was, it just felt so good to be confirmed in what I was doing and the training that I had and the mission, I guess, I was on to give people the experience that I thought was so deeply healing. Yeah. So that's how it came about.
So, Georgia, I remember looking for you. I remember now it was around COVID, and, we were stuck inside. And I think that was when a lot of people were pulled more to nature because we had a lot more freedom outside. And I think that shifted, humanity quite a bit, of being drawn more to nature. And so could you go over some of those scientifically proven benefits of forest therapy, forest bathing, as far as reducing anxiety and stress?
Yes, there's so much. There's so much cool stuff. And I am not a medical clinician, so you guys, you might have to, I'm just saying that. Go Google whatever I'm saying. But this is what I have gathered through lots of reading and writing papers in grad school and, the beat on the street. Where to start? So research has shown a lot of times, let me just give a little foundation. Many of these studies have compared time spent in an urban environment to time spent in a natural environment. And that could be a few hours. It could be a walk home through 2 different routes. Other research studies will, take people out into the woods for 8 hours or sometimes 3 days, but it's all kind of a short natural experience versus city experience. So just to give some context to that. So they have found that feelings of reported anxiety and depression reduce after time spent in nature. Vigor, feelings of creativity, connectivity, peacefulness increase. Feelings of aggression are reduced. This is all on the emotional front. There's a lot of physiological stuff happening that I think ties in. It's all connected, as y'all know. Cortisol is reduced, that fight or flight hormone. And as a result, serotonin, cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline all reduce after a short time spent in nature. And this is gathered through saliva and all kinds of tests. Serotonin, they have found, is increased after a certain time spent in nature. So there's chemical backing to these reported feelings of lessened anxiety and depression. I think I will add in, as a mental health therapist, I think the connectedness that people start to feel and the remembrance of their place in the system of all things also adds to the reduction in depression and anxiety. Because what I see as a therapist is, I think disconnection from other humans and from the system of things is a root of a lot of pain. So that's kind of a side note. I haven't seen any studies, backing that or anything, but I think that also contributes to anxiety and depression being reduced. Another cool component of forest bathing or time spent in nature is the immune system function. So when you're cortisol zone running from a tiger, your immune system says, nope, I don't need to work right now. I will work later. But then the problem with modern stressful society is there's never a later. Our cortisol, just stays up. There's so much input coming into our brains at all times. So when you can reduce those stressors, when you're in nature and you start to engage through your senses and feel where you are in space and time, and the cortisol starts to reduce, then the immune system function can work more properly. There's another element of the immune system function that's really nerdy and cool to talk about, and it's phytoncides. So trees, especially evergreen trees, give off these, they're kind of like their own little essential oil particles into the air, and they protect them from pests and fungi and things like that. And when we are amongst the trees, we are breathing in phytoncides into our lungs, and the phytoncides kick off this response of our NK cells. And I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not a medical provider, but what I understand is NK cells are the part of the immune system that goes throughout the body to look for potential problems and take care of them before they become bigger problems. And that NK cell activity and count is raised for up to 7 days after we leave nature. So spending a few hours outside amongst trees ups your immunity all week. It's so cool. So that's another.
I love that you share that.
Isn't
It
so
is. It's
cool?
like one of those cool aspects that really no one talks about. We talk about, how the mind and body is connected, how that helps, but you just brought in the true, like the medicine of the tree. So thank you for that.
It's actual medicine coming from them to our lungs. And then, so I learned that first. And then later I've started to understand and put together, how the endocrine system plays into that, how cortisol plays into immunity and how those are connected, and the nervous system too. So heart rate and blood pressure are also reduced based on evidence after time spent in nature. So your nervous system starts to calm and transition. There's this cool study that I learned somewhere in training where they found that when people stare at a horizon, the parasympathetic nervous system finally can kick into gear. So you'll go from sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic rest and digest by staring at a horizon. Fascinating. I don't know why, but it's happening. And I've tried it out with people. I'll do an invitation for staring at the horizon, and I'll notice people start to yawn at different points as their systems calm into parasympathetic. It's so neat. There's so much happening in the body. Another one of my favorite pieces of research is called attention restoration theory. And Dr. Stephen and Ann Kaplan, it's been some years now, but they did this study about, they call it soft fascination time. I think you asked about this before in your questions. So they found that the more time we spend in soft fascination, and I'll talk about what that is, the more capacity for attention we create in our brains. So it's attention restoration. Time spent in nature is restoring our capacity for attention. So soft fascination is watching a flame flicker, or watching a waterfall fall, or watching a leaf blow gently in the wind. That kind of organic, irregular movement, when our brains can focus on that kind of movement for a while, which is all, once you get into nature, it's everywhere. It's everywhere you look, there's something slightly moving. So we're in a lot of soft fascination time when we're on the forest therapy walk, and we're creating capacity for attention in our brains. So I think the implications for like ADHD diagnoses and treatment, and there's so much to do in the forest therapy and forest bathing and nature therapy world. There's so much to come, I think. Exciting.
So cool. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question. So you talked about disconnection and connectedness a lot. How do you see that? Like, we hear the term, but how do you see that in your clients? Maybe how they utilize their words. Like, what does it mean to them? How does it present? Like, do they know they're being more connected and disconnected, or what is that experience for them?
That's it's hard to describe. I think I mean, I have heard people literally say the words, oh, I feel more connected. I feel more in place. I feel my size in the universe. I remember my grandmother's house. I used to lay in this moss patch in her yard. So they're not only connecting to the beings that they're around, but they're also connecting to themselves and memory and time, right? Like that whole thing, time comes into play and memory comes into play. And who are you and where have you come from? So there's a lot of internal connection happening. And then if I have a group, often people will, in our sharing circles, which are really brief throughout the walk, but you'll see it start to come up throughout the few hours. They'll say, you know, it's just so neat to be with you all. It's so nice to be with you guys. You know, I don't know you, but it's so cool to be here. A lot of that starts to come up.
Very cool. And so here's another one. Kay, I'm hogging all the questions, so hop on it. But, you know, when we did it, you know, Kay and I did it as partners, and, you know, it was just like another level of connection with another human being, which was very, very cool. Do you have a lot of couples that do this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's very cool. All right.
It's so fun. I love guiding couples. It's really neat. Yeah. I have a lot of individuals. That's what I've moved to in the past year or so, is less big public groups and more private individual walks or couples walks. Yeah, it's really sweet. And a lot of times one person will be the nature person and the other half of the couple will be really anxious or just along for the ride. Yeah, yes. Kay's raising her hand. Yeah, and that's really cool because we can just go. I mean, there is no arrival. We're not journeying to like a you made it, you did it place. And it's just I think it's really neat for the anxious partner who's not very, you know, who didn't spend a lot of time in nature maybe, to build confidence in that way. Like I can be outside, I can feel leaves, I can pick up sticks. I can stand here in the woods for 20 minutes by myself and then rally with my husband. It's a cool equalizer.
So Kay, as you raised your hand. Yeah, like Kay, as you raised your hand, what was your experience with that? Like being thrown into nature?
I'm not really a nature girl, but I remember this walk with you where, because it's intimidating, I'm intimidated by mountains. I'm intimidated by, you know, little paths that I don't know where I'm ending up and where I'm going, which is so relative to how I sometimes in my life, if I don't know where point B is, I freak out. So my life has been about managing the path along the way to ensure that I'm safe along that path, you know? And so what I was going to say was, after when we concluded, you're right, there was this co-creation. Like I felt held. I felt like this is not the boogeyman. You know, there aren't things necessarily like hiding in the trees. Maybe there was, but I wasn't looking for it, but I was looking, my perspective was the beauty of it. And God made this, like, this is so stunning. I mean, just the shapes and how the ecosystem itself was just interdependent on each other. There wasn't, you know, everything has sort of its little place. It knew where to grow. It knew how to interact with each other. I mean, it was so fascinating to me of, you know, the trees weren't freaking out. They're just really calm and able to generate energy and heal. Imagine that. Like, so there's just so much fullness in there. And I love playing in that space. And I didn't realize how stepping into the forest could do that. You know, there's so much if we just slow down, stop, and being guided to look at certain things that I'm used to not looking at. So the experience was so full. But yeah, it's anxiety producing if you're just going in there amongst these trees and hoping not to get bitten by So, you know what I mean? It's such a fear sort of way of being, and just that down regulate, and you also helping us source our breath and being one with it. Like this is your friend, this is your protector, and it's your healer. So, calm down.
Or kind of like ground up. I think the pace of it and the tiny area of it helps a lot for people to. I remember in my training, we had to sit in the same spot every day for 20 minutes for 6 weeks. And my eyes, I would stare at this. I'm having trouble speaking linearly because I'm excited and then my brain gets all right brain. I would stare at a treescape in my backyard, right? Like the foliage of trees. And for weeks, it just looked like kind of a 2D sort of green equal sign or a dash. At the end of the 6 weeks, my eyes could literally see more depth and more contour and more detail. The whole scape changed. It's like it deepened. It became like one of those hologram bookmarks or something of itself. And it just made me realize how anxiety makes us see landscape. When you walk onto a trailhead and you're feeling not so great about it, what's out there? How many things are out there? Where does the path go? Your brain is in a little bit fight or flight threat mode, and you just see 2D shapes. It's almost like a flattened green and brown. And to walk into that as a tiny human with this flat, huge tree height shapes of landscapes is really scary. But if you can spend enough time in a tiny spot and start to notice the tiny ants that are moving on the bark or the little spider web blowing in the breeze, then you start to get placed there in the system of things. And it's almost like your selfness and your body becomes its appropriate size. And you're not scared of the tall things anymore, or the path that's way out there, or the depth of things, because you've got a grip on it almost through texture and smell and shape and tiny things, a tiny movement. You start to get a grip on where you are and what this place really is like. It becomes less scary.
That's exactly what happened. I mean, and even we were in Jackson Hole and, driving up to those mountains. I'm like, oh my gosh. And Rob used to live there and like run up the mountains during lunch. I'm like, now here I am. I'm like, those are so big. This is so intimidating. Exactly what you were saying. And then it got better when I was immersed in it, like you were saying, growing into it, because this is how I felt compared to that. And when you're saying, even the ants, and it's not, it's really trying to be equal, right? Coexist with each other. And, taking that out of the forest and into our lives is, coming to it. Like sometimes when I'm intimidated, I shrink. And so how do I develop those skills or those neural pathways to be like, you're safe, you're okay. See, I guess that's what you're saying. And, cause safety is so primary in healing and just, like you're saying, just getting invited into that of like, okay, one step, see, this is really beautiful. And then you can start to see the beauty, or I started to see the beauty of it because my fight or flight turned on. And, that's when creativity and psychic ability and intuition starts to come on. And that kind of reminded me of that sort of vision that you were experiencing, the depth. It just shuts off, right? When you're in fear, because it's literally black or white. It's like, am I going to die or am I not going to die?
Exactly. I don't need the depth of that branch. I just need to know that branch is there and I'm going to run around that and strategize.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I'm so glad you had that experience. I see it happen a lot and I feel it within myself.
Something else that came to mind with that, because, Kay and I have gone on trails and stuff, excuse me, but oftentimes what you do is you bring the regular world with you. So we've been like, let's go on a little walk, let's go on a hike or something like that. But at some points we're just like talking about regular life, right? And we brought it with us. But, as you guided us, there was that intentionality that came with it. And I think it just brings you right into presence. And it's just, that was another key factor because yes, we're out of that fight or flight mode. But it just makes it a different experience. So thank you for that. I think that's just a great point for when people want to consider to do this.
I think that speaks also to moving into the right brain, which is one thing that happens on a forest therapy walk. It's inevitable because nature is not left-brained. It's not verbal or linear. It's more lateral and relational and timeless and nonverbal. So as you get into right brain, which is body, it's through your senses, touch, smell, sight, sound, imagination. As we move into right brain, that other stuff kind of falls away because it doesn't compute. Like figuring it out linearly doesn't compute with being in a right brain headspace. But ironically, that's where creativity and connection happen. And I wish I had 4 of myself so I could spend a lot of time marketing to big businesses and say, look what would happen if you let your employees do a weekly forest bathing walk. Like the creativity and the innovation that could occur, if you just let some right brain happen.
I love that. That's very cool.
That's amazing. So how can listeners learn more about your work, Georgia, and how can they come down or up or left, right to come see you?
Come on in. Yeah, I have foresttherapynashville.com and my email address is on there. It's connect@foresttherapynashville.com. Just reaching out. Like I said, I'm doing a lot more private individual walks or couples walks or private groups. I might be going down to Chattanooga soon to do a group. So I've traveled some and that's really fun. Or people can come to me and we can just go do a walk. So yeah, just reach out via email. And I have a video on my website too that speaks a little bit more about the practice so they can learn a bit more. There's some resources on there. And I'm always here to just talk about it. I love doing stuff like this because I really think it can change the world.
So you do it, okay, individually, sometimes in groups, right? Is there a particular, I can't remember the park or the place that we did ours. Is that the same one you do for most of your walks?
I do different parks, but I also just formed a relationship with a psychiatrist here in Nashville who's on board with all these different healing modalities. And she has a farm not far outside of Nashville at all. It's like 15 minutes from my house in East Nashville. And so I've been doing a lot of walks on her farm, which is so nice. Thank you, Dr. Neff. Yeah, it's really nice.
So I was thinking it'd be a fun thing to offer our listeners a challenge. And, you might have alluded to it already, but I was going to ask if you can offer someone one thing that they can do from the comfort of their own home or their backyard to start to bring nature in, to start to feel it. You alluded to part of your training, staring at something for 20 minutes. Would that be something, or do you have anything else that pops to mind?
Yes. I mean, that sitting in the same spot for a week for 20 minutes would be phenomenal, or 6 weeks, but maybe not doable for everybody. I'm real passionate about making this practice accessible and not one more thing to fail at for people. And I live in an urban environment, so I've got lots of ideas. I'll just rattle them off, like things that you can do in a city. So I'll tell people, walking from your door to your car, just look over for a moment and notice the color of the grass that day. Same thing, walking from your car to your house, look up. So how often do we look up? Look up. The sky is everywhere, even in New York City. What's the color of the blue today? I wonder how deep the sky is. I wonder what the temperature up there is like. What is that cloud shape? I wonder what the temperature of that cloud is. I wonder if I could touch it with my hand, what would the texture be? That's getting into imagination stuff, which might be challenging for some people. But simply looking, noticing color and noticing shape are the easiest visual things we can do anywhere, anytime. Wind. I was just in my car today and I rolled down the window and I held my hand out of the window. Wind is a being. It's nature. What's the texture? Just feel it. Feel the texture, feel the temperature, feel the shape of the wind. What happens when you spread your fingers apart or keep them together? How does it change what it feels like? And then to take it a step further, if you want to get, your neighbors to wonder what you're doing, walk over to the grass and pick up a little piece. Feel it within your fingers. Hold it to your ear. Maybe go feel a tree that you have in your yard. What does the bark sound like if you scratch it? I could go on and on, but these kind of little things are accessible at any time, even if you have a busy life in a city.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Come walk, and you'll walk away with me or another guide. There are lots of guides now. You can find them at anft.earth. There's a guide directory. But come.earth, I know. How do they do that? I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing. Come walk with me, and you'll walk away with just the feeling in your bones of a different way of using your senses in nature. And you can take that home. That's my hope, anyway. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys for asking the questions and also for coming to walk when you didn't know what it was. And Kay, when you weren't that into it. I love people that are trying things. Yeah.
Well, you can imagine me. She's like, hey, do you? I'm like, yeah.
Yes. Tomorrow. Yeah.
Look how wet and cold it is. I'm there.
Yeah. Come on back. Anytime y'all want to come down, holler to Nashville. Yeah. Thank you guys. You guys are doing such amazing work. So important.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soul of Medicine podcast, where science meets soul for whole health healing. Are you ready to reclaim your energy, vitality, and soul purpose? Then feel free to head to our website at kcorpusmd.com and schedule an appointment for your root cause review.